All right, fam. Thanks for coming back to the Undeserved Flavor. I'm back already with Universalism, the prevailing doctrine of the Christian Church in its first 500 years, by John Wesley Hansen, originally published in 1899. We are going to get into that which I spoke of in the previous video when I read Doctrines of Mitigation and Reserve. Going to read Summary of Conclusions, which is basically the last chapter of this book, because it nutshells this book very nicely. And it is a nutshell, so it doesn't flow like you're reading a chapter on a particular topic. You'll know what I'm talking about when we get into it. So I am not going to babble on or get into a ramble. I am going to jump right in to the reading. I may jump in at some point or another to give a thought if something jumps out at me. There's an alarm clock going off. I'm going to stop it because I don't know if you can hear it in the video. It's my kids' room. And I'm back. The magic of the pause button. Right. So just starting this whole video over a second time. Just hit that pause button. All right, here it is. Summary of conclusions. A few of the many points established in the foregoing pages may here be named. Here we go. 1. During the first century, the primitive Christians did not dwell on matters of eschatology, i.e., rapture, second coming, and the like, or any kind of end times talk, but devoted their attention to apologetics. They were chiefly anxious to establish the fact of Christ's advent and of its blessings to the world. Possibly the question of destiny was an open one, till paganism and Judaism introduced erroneous ideas, when the New Testament doctrine of apokatastasis, universal restoration, was asserted, and universal restoration became an accepted belief, as stated later by Clement and Origen, AD 180 to 230. 2. The catacombs give us the views of the unlearned, as Clement and Origen state the doctrine of scholars and teachers. Not a syllable is found hinting at the horrors of Augustinianism, but the inscription on every monument harmonizes with the universalism of the early fathers. Clement declares that all punishment, however severe, is purificatory, that even the torments of the damned are curative. Origen explains even Gehenna as a signifying limited and curative punishment, and both, as all other ancient universalists declare, that everlasting punishment, aeonian, which means an age. Ages come to an end. They're not everlasting. Bad translation. Is consistent. I keep looking at my phone camera, which is recording, and the flash is on, and now I can't see. I keep looking back to the page, and it's like, now I'm blind. So that it is. All right, I'm going to back up one sentence here. Origen explains even Gehenna as signifying limited and curative punishment, and both, as all the other ancient universalists declare, that everlasting aeonian punishment is consonant with universal salvation, so that it is no proof that other primitive Christians who are less explicit as to the final result taught endless punishment when they employ the same terms. Number 4, like our Lord and his apostles, the primitive Christians avoided the words which the pagans and Jews defined endless punishment. Iodios, or dialepton timora. I've never seen that word before. It means endless torment. A doctrine the latter believed and knew how to describe, but they, the early Christians, called punishment, as did our Lord Colasus Aeonius, discipline, chastisement of indefinite, limited duration. I shouldn't have to break that down for you. The early Christians taught that Christ preached the gospel to the dead, and for that purpose descended into Hades. Many held that he released all who were in ward, in prison. Remember, this book was originally written in 1899, so some of the wording is going to be a little outdated. This shows that repentance beyond the grave, perpetual probation, was then accepted, which precludes the modern error that the soul's destiny is decided at death. I keep wanting to look at the camera, but I don't want to go blind. The idea that false threats were necessary to keep the common people in check and that the truth might be held esoterically prevailed among earlier Christians, so that there could be no doubt that many who seemed to teach endless punishment really held the broader views, as we know the most did, and preached terrors pedagogically. 8. The first comparatively complete systematic statement of Christian doctrine ever given to the world was by Clement of Alexandria, AD 180, and universal salvation was one of its tenets. Number 9. The first complete presentation of Christianity as a system was by Origen, AD 220, and universal salvation was explicitly contained in it. Number 10. Universal salvation was the prevailing doctrine in Christendom as long as Greek, the language of the New Testament, was the language of Christendom. Universalism was generally believed in the best centuries, the first 3, when the Christians were most remarkable for simplicity, goodness, and missionary zeal. 12. Universalism was least known when Greek, the language of the New Testament, was least known, and when Latin was the language of the Church in its darkest, most ignorant, and corrupt ages. Chew on that one. 13. Not a writer among those who describe the heresies of the first 300 years intimates that universalism was then a heresy, though it was believed by many, if not be a majority, and certainly by the greatest of the fathers. 14. Not a single creed for 500 years expresses any idea contrary to universal restoration or in favor of endless punishment. Number 15. With the exception of the arguments of Augustine, AD 420, dude showed up late. There was not an argument known to have been framed against universalism for at least 400 years after Christ by any of the ancient fathers. While the councils, this is number 16, that assembled in various parts of Christendom, anathematized every kind of doctrine supposed to be heretical, no ecumenical council for more than 500 years condemned universalism, though it had been advocated in every century by the principal scholars and most revered saints. 17. As late as 400 AD, Jerome says, most people Plerique, and Augustine, very many, quam plurimi, believed in universalism, notwithstanding that the tremendous influence of Augustine and the mighty power of the semi-pagan secular arm were arrayed against it. 18. The principal ancient universalists were Christian-born and reared, and were among the most scholarly and saintly of the ancient saints. Number 19. See, these are all points that you would get in reading the book. This is the conclusion. We're summarizing here. So if you skipped ahead and you missed, what am I reading? I'm just reading a bunch of points. This is the conclusion of the book, point by point. Like, these are all like the mic drop moments of reading the book. So every one of these points has an explanation, has sources, has notes, has historical references. So if you want to see more in depth as to where these points are coming from, pick the book up. It ain't expensive. Maybe $10. Probably less. Get to your house by tomorrow if you got Amazon. Back to it. Number 19. The most celebrated of the earlier advocates of endless punishment were heathen-born. Let me read that again. The most celebrated of the earlier advocates of endless punishment, Augustine, were heathen-born. Remember the previous point? The principal ancient universalists were Christian-born and reared, and were among the most scholarly and saintly of the ancient saints. But then the people who came later, who advocated more clearly for endless punishment, were originally heathen-born and led corrupt lives in their youth. Tertullian was one of the first, and then Augustine, the greatest of them, confessed to have been among the vilest. Augustine was a pagan Manichaeist. The first advocates of endless punishment, Municius Felix, Tertullian, and Augustine, were Latins, ignorant of Greek. Not just did they not speak Greek, Augustine admits refusing to learn it because he was jaded from his school years growing up. His teachers were mean. So he had other people interpret the scriptures for him. So back to number 20. The first advocates of endless punishment, Municius Felix, Tertullian, and Augustine, were Latins, ignorant of the Greek, and less competent to interpret the meaning of Greek scriptures than were Greek scholars, like Clement and Origen and all the people that actually spoke Greek. The first advocates of universalism after the apostles were Greeks, in whose mother tongue the New Testament was written. They found their universalism in the Greek Bible, Who should be correct? They or the Latins? Number 22, the Greek fathers announced the great truth of universal restoration in an age of darkness, sin, and corruption. There was nothing to suggest it to them in the world's literature or religion. It was wholly contrary to everything around them. Where else could they have found it? But where they say they did? The gospel? Where they say they did in the gospel? All ecclesiastical historians and the best biblical critics and scholars agree to the prevalence of universalism in early centuries. 24. From the days of Clement of Alexandria to those of Gregory of Nyssa and Theodore of Mopsuestia, AD 1880 to 428, the great theologians and teachers, almost without exception, were universalists. No equal number in the same centuries were comparable to them for learning and goodness. 25. The first theological school in Christendom, that in Alexandria, taught universalism for more than 200 years. 26. In all Christendom, from AD 170 to 430, there were 6 Christian schools. Of these, 4, the only strictly theological schools, taught universalism, and but 1, endless torment. 27. The 3 earliest Gnostic sects, the Basilidians and the Carpocratians, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, and the Valentinians, AD 117 to 132, are condemned by Christian writers and their heresies pointed out. But though they taught universalism, that doctrine is never condemned by those who oppose them. Irenaeus condemned the errors of the Carpocratians, but does not reprehend their universalism, though he ascribes the doctrine to them. So like when these guys are being corrected or reproved or called out for where they're wrong, the points are being specifically addressed where they're wrong, like the Gnostics. The scholars who were the closest to the church truth and those who were the most revered in the church as fathers, when they were calling out heresies, notice people that came in with heresies, even though they had some truth, they had universalism, but they also had some crap. They were calling out the crap. Why, if they were calling out the crap, didn't they mention universalism if universalism was part of the crap? I'm just going to stay with the reading here. Okay, so the first defense, 28, the first defense of Christianity against infidelity, Origin against Celsus, puts the defense on universalistic grounds. Celsus charged the Christians' God with cruelty because he punished with fire. Origen replied that God's fire is curative, that he is a consuming fire because he consumes sin, not the sinner. 29. Origen, back up. Can you, for a second, just like use logic and realize, even though these guys are talking like this, they're not being literal. God isn't literally burning a person until the sin is gone with literal fire. It is metaphor. God is a father, literally, with a fiery passion, literally, wrapping his loving arms around his kicking and screaming child, literally, until that kicking and screaming rebellious tantrum, sin, literally, leaves. Until they give it up and come home like the prodigal son. Use logic. You'll be able to see these metaphors and stop reading the metaphors literally like an idiot. Sorry. We've been so dogmatized. Every church, if we have 44,000 denominations of Christianity, and virtually all of them are basically just superstition. Just founded on superstition. Magical powers and superstition. The blood of Jesus was a magic trick. No, the blood of Jesus was an act. It was a display. It was like you go to the store, you take your kid to the store, and you're not telling your kid what you're going to do there. You're walking through the aisles, you're shopping, your kid's bored, whatever, you're throwing a bunch of stuff in the cart, but in your head you're thinking, I want to show my kid kindness. How do I do that? I should lead by example. You get up to the counter to check out, and you see your kid over your shoulder. He's watching you like a hawk because he's your kid and he's just watching you. And you tap the guy's shoulder ahead of you and say, hey, let me pay for your groceries. Meanwhile, you're not talking to your kid. You're just doing this. Your kid's watching. And the guy breaks down in tears, starts telling his whole life story. Everything's been hard. He actually didn't know if he had enough money in his account. He didn't know if his card was going to be declined. It ends up being this big whole thing. He saves the guy's day. And then they pay for their groceries. They go home. Now the kid saw this whole event transpire. Did the dad perform a magic trick with what he instilled into the kid in his act of kindness? No magic tricks. It was simply a display, an example set. That's what Jesus did when he came to the earth. Lived a sinless life because he knew who he was. He didn't doubt. It was the opposite of sin is knowing, not belief. Knowing who you are. It's not being stuck in an identity crisis, not being an orphan, not being someone who doesn't know God as Father. Jesus was sinless because he knew God as Father. The cross was a display that he put on for the world to see the heart of the Father. That's what it was. So that when people saw this display of other-centered, self-giving love, they would see the heart of the Father. And they would want to emanate that as children of God. How do you heap fiery coals on your enemy's head? Be kind to them. Follow the example of love, the other-centered, self-giving love of Jesus. The blood wasn't a magic trick. It was a show. It was a display of character. There's no superstition involved. Now, I got off on a rabbit trail. I said I was going to try not to ramble. Got to wrap this up. We do have supernatural abilities because we are supernatural, spiritual beings living in a meat suit temporarily. So the woo-woo is not woo-woo and something to be doubted or questioned. It's a legit and real thing. But it doesn't work on superstition, like flipping a coin. If it lands on heads, I'm going to be lucky today. That's not how it works. No, it works when you know. When you walk into the store and you know you have money in your bank account, your card works. I'm just using that as an example. Like, what if, your card doesn't work because your bank locked your account or something weird happened or your card expired or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, if you know you have the power of God to heal in you and you walk up to somebody without doubt because you know, not because you busted a faith hernia, conjuring this in spiritual warfare the night before to to build yourself up and attain something that you previously hadn't had, to go heal somebody. No, you just, when you know who you are, you know who you are, and you're going to act like it, and it's going to work. Simple as that. Anyway, getting back into it. I'm just really annoyed at the superstitious tendencies of churchianity. Now, when you go to a church that's not superstitious and they're just a loving community, it's my kind of group. That comes in many flavors. I'm not bad talking church in general. Number 29, Origen, the chief representative of Universalism in the ancient centuries, was bitterly opposed and condemned for various heresies by ignorant and cruel fanatics. He was accused of opposing episcopacy, believing in the pre-existence, etc., but never was condemned for his universalism. So Origen, you get into this conversation with people who claim to know church history, and you bring up the word Origen, and immediately they're Origen. No, he was condemned. He was condemned at the council. Well, actually, no, he wasn't condemned at the Council of Nicaea. The Roman emperor pressured the meeting to happen. The popes, the bishops, whoever it was, actually didn't want to be there. The emperor of Rome, who was not a church leader, wanted Origen anathematized because the doctrine of apocalypsis, aka the gospel, was a threat to the worldly governing bodies of the day, the worldly governing powers of the day. It's a really simple concept. Why do you think they remanufactured Christianity? Origen was not even condemned for his belief in universalism when he was eventually anathematized. He was anathematized for the fact that he tossed the idea around of the pre-existence of souls, because it was never really assumed or understood that we pre-existed. It was always just assumed that we were created at the time of our conception. So for him to float these ideas was like witchcraft to the, closed-minded idiots that didn't want to just sit down and have a critical thought. And then beyond that, I think reincarnation was one of the things that he floated. And he wasn't preaching these things. He wasn't like pounding these things in as Christian dogma. He was just open-minded. He wasn't tossing certain things out. It wasn't like he was like one of the Gnostics coming in with the dogma that needed to be come against by someone, like an apologetic, or you know what I mean. Anyway, I got to stick to the reading. Origen, the chief representative of Universalism in the ancient centuries, was bitterly opposed and condemned for various heresies by ignorant and cruel fanatics. He was accused of opposing episcopacy, believing in pre-existence, etc., but never was condemned for his universalism. The very council that anathematized Origenism eulogized Gregory of Nyssa, who was explicitly a universalist, as was Origen. Lists of his errors are given by Methodius, Pamphilus, and Eusebius, Marcellus, Eustathius, and Jerome. But universalism is not named by one of his opponents. Fancy a list of Bellew's errors and his universalism omitted. Hippolytus, AD 320, names 32 known heresies, but Universalism is not mentioned as among them. Epiphanius, I can never say these guys' names. I read them all the time. I don't know how they're pronounced. Epiphanius, the hammer of heretics, describes 80 heresies, but he does not mention universal salvation, though Gregory of Nyssa, an outspoken universalist, was, at the time he wrote, the most conspicuous figure in Christendom. Number 30. Justinian, a half-pagan emperor who attempted to have universalism officially condemned, leave it to the pagans to come against the gospel, lived in the most corrupt epoch of the Christian centuries. He closed the theological schools and demanded the condemnation of universalism by law. But the doctrine was so prevalent in the church that the council refused to obey his edict to suppress it. Lecky says the age of Justinian was the worst form of civilization, civilization has assumed. 31. The first clear and definite statement of human destiny by any Christian writer after the days of the apostles includes universal restoration. And that doctrine, did you just wake up? No? I saw you napping. The first clear and definite statement of human destiny by any Christian writer after the days of the apostles includes universal restoration. And that doctrine was advocated by most of the greatest and best of the Christian fathers for the first 500 years of the Christian era. In one word, a careful study of the early Christian religion will show that the doctrine of universal restoration was least prevalent in the darkest and most prevalent in the most enlightened of the earliest centuries. That it was the prevailing doctrine in the primitive Christian church. Well, there you have it, folks. If you were able to bear with me in my reading, obviously I am not a professional narrator. I think I'm going to do a bunch of YouTube shorts. I'm going to do these things like one by one for YouTube shorts. Post like one a day or a handful of them a day or something like that. But so what do you think about all those mic drop bullet points? I mean, those are some pretty hard hitting, things. So anyway, so that is the nutshell of the book. I mean, that's a pretty heavy duty nutshell. Like I said, like when you open the book, like for a long time, I didn't even read the whole book. When I got the book, I read that chapter first and I set the book down. Well, actually I read that chapter and then I read the first chapter. And since I have so many other books to read, I'm like, well, I already know what that book says. Put the book down and went into something else. I never actually got through the whole thing. I didn't need to. You got your meat and potatoes right there. The rest of it's just salad. I mean, if you really want to get into it, where does it say that? Where was it? Show me where you got that idea from. Well, you can go to the book and actually read. Every single one of these chapters has references and notes and sources, i.e., number 1, Yosemite Bib Orient, Tom 3. Number 2, Dict Christ Bio. I can't read them because I keep looking at the. Anyway, can you see that? It's thorough. It's thorough enough. Like after every single chapter, there's a source list. I'm too far removed from the public school system to remember what that's called at the end of an essay. Actually, I have it at the tip of my tongue, but can't remember it. That's it. I mean, I don't even have anything to add to that right now. I mean, I could babble and ramble, but why? You know, that was it. I mean, that's pretty much it, you know. So we'll leave it at that. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video, man. Come on now. Do me a solid and drop a comment. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. If you have another YouTube channel, log into that one and throw me a second subscribe and a like. I want to try and get this channel moving. I've had this channel going for a few years now, and I haven't really been super devoted to it. I want to be, but I mean, there's no incentive, really, you know? I mean, I know there's a few people that tune in here. I haven't really, honestly, offered much more than just my opinion, but if I'm going to be doing this more and more, I'm actually going to bring something to the table, and that is be a little bit of a source. Like, I'm not coming up with any of this crap on my own, other than my opinion, but my opinion is not self-generated. It's from books that I've written, other, you know, your opinion comes from somewhere. Everybody's got an opinion, a schema. It came from somewhere. And I know there's people out there that are going through deconstruction, or they're seeking, you know, Christianity. And this particular flavor of Christianity has been so stuffed and snuffed out by the mainstream church for so long. People just, you know, have nowhere to go to get this information. So here I am. Throw my videos in front of your pastor and be like, hey, what do you think of this guy? You know, have him watch me. You know, tell him to get on and drop a comment and, you know, give me his best argument. And I'm not just going to get on there and rant. I don't like arguing personally. I feel it's completely a waste of time. So if there's a comment, if I don't answer it right away, it's because I'm actually going to answer it thoughtfully. And I'm going to find some sources. I'm going to find some biblical evidence, scriptural evidence, historical evidence. I'm going to, you know, dig in and see who I know personally, or who I know from a distance, that can address that. And I'm going to put a rebuttal together if I don't know it already. I know pretty much all the rebuttals for any ETC believer, or for what anything an ETC believer is going to bring to the table, but I'm just not the most articulate person. So it's easier for me to write or type because I can think better than it is for me to talk off the cuff. As you can see, if you've seen any of my videos, I ramble a lot, and things don't come to mind as quick as they should. So I do terrible on a debate stage, but give me a chance to actually type it or write it, and I'll be there with the best of them. Anyway, it's probably how it is with most people. But yeah, so I hope you liked that reading today. You don't have to get the book, but I'd recommend it. You know, I've had this book for a few years, and I actually bought literally like 10 of them, 8 or 10 of them. I bought one, then I bought another one because I gave the one away. And then I'm like, I'm just going to, because they're so freaking cheap. It was like $8.99 or something on Amazon, or $7.99. So I just bought 10 of them because I knew I'm going to be giving this book away. And it's like, with that many mic drops, you know, it's so easy. Like if one of your, you know, let's say you got a family member who's just, oh, I feel so bad for you. I fear for your soul. You're going off into that new age. You know, you can be like, hey, listen, I appreciate your patriotism. I appreciate you patronizing me and your condescension, but we can sit down and have a conversation if you're willing to have a conversation. Let's look at some history here. Don't show them the cover of the book. Just say, rip the cover off before you get it. Get over to them. Just rip the cover off. And be like, this is a Christian. Make sure you get this page too, because it says Universalism on it. And they're already like the demons that they carry around with them, the ones, you know, that they're seeking and warring with every day. Yeah, those demons are going to point to that word first, and it's just like, they're going to manifest. So, you know, rip those pages off. Any of the first pages that say Universalism or whatever, you know, rip them off, and then maybe you can like use the doctrine of reserve, or mitigation and bend to the truth a little bit and say, this is a book against universalism. And then you can show them, look, it's just a church history book. Look, what do you think? This was Jerome. This was Athanasius. This is Augustine. Everybody knows Augustine. Look, Augustine. He agreed with all these other guys. Augustine was originally a universalist, and then, oh my gosh, he flip-flopped. And then, oh my gosh, he admitted he didn't know how to speak Greek and admitted that he came to some funky conclusions because of the bad translations. Hold on, I'm almost done. Okay. It's like, just present some stuff, man. And that, or just go straight to just like literally tear out the mic drop pages or take a couple pictures or go on Kindle and download the book and screenshot the last chapter of the book. These bullet point mic drops and, just text them to them one by one. Be like, hey, did you know this? Did you know this? Do you know why I am the way I am? Do you know why I'm questioning the way we've been taught? Because I learned something. I didn't just have a touchy-feely moment where a demon came in my mind and gave me a prophecy. Like a lot of today's charismatic world, they don't even know what they believe. They're like the Samaritans. They have no idea. You go to any charismatic church, you can't even have a conversation with them on doctrine because they don't even know what they believe. You can't get through one sentence. You can't get one sentence out of them without them flip-flopping on their own beliefs. It's like they flip-flop as much as the Bible does. They flip-flop as much as the Old Testament flip-flops to the New Testament. Like they have no ground to stand on. And that's why there's no point in arguing. Absolutely no point at all. But actually the real point, or the real reason there's no point in arguing is because you or nobody can actually open their eyes through persuasive words. Like Paul said, one of my favorite scriptures, I did not come to you with the persuasive words of man, but in signs and wonders or powers or miracles or whatever he said, that your faith would be in the power of God. So, but you can bring the power of God to them and plant some seeds and mention some of these points, drop them a text message. Hey, just a quick text. Universalism was least known when Greek, the language of the New Testament, was least known. And when Latin was the language of the church, it was the most dark time in history, the most ignorant and corrupt of ages. Okay, so what's the point of that? Well, let's see. The world was flocking to Christendom in the first few centuries. What happened after Rome took over? It became, it was a cult. It became a cult. And then you had the Crusades and all that other crap. Anyway, I am rambling, so you are welcome to click off at any time. But don't you forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Drop me a like. Drop me a comment. And, let me know if you like where I'm going with this. And like I said, I'm going to say it again. My yes is my yes and my no is no. I'm not making any promises, but I want to soon get into the new mystics and get in and just read some accounts of some of the crazy mystical Christians that were outcasts by the church in the last couple of millennia, only later to be sainted. It's funny how the Catholic Church will call somebody a witch and cast them out, and they end up running through the wilderness and raising people from the dead and levitating and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then 500 years later, that person is, comes back to attention, and it's like all of a sudden the Catholic Church is like, oh wait, no, that was our person. No, that was Saint so and so. They were Catholic. Yeah, they were with us. Yeah, but when the person was alive, they were running for their lives, trying not to get killed by the Catholic Church or put in a torture chamber. Yeah. Wonder how many Catholic churches have torture chambers under there. Never mind. Today. I probably use them for something else. Oh, I shouldn't go there. Yeah. Let the priests just get freaking married. My gosh. Celibacy was not the way. All right, that's it. I'm done. Done. Thanks for watching The Undeserved Flavor. Taste and see that the Lord is good.